There is a truth hiding in plain sight in every credit application in this country, and it is this. The safest man in the room is the one they flag as dangerous, and the man drowning in debt is the one they hand the keys to. Let me tell you about a man named Marcus. Marcus is 58 years old. He paid off his house 11 years ago, in cash. After refusing every refinance offer, his bank mailed him for a decade. He drives a truck that is 14 years old and runs perfectly because he maintains it himself in his own garage on Saturday mornings. He carries one debit card, that is all. No credit cards, no car note, no personal loan, no medical debt, nothing. For 30 years, Marcus did exactly what his father told him to do. Owe nothing. Owe no one. Sleep easy. And 2 months ago, when Marcus tried to rent a small apartment near his daughter's new house, so he could help with his first grandchild, he was denied. Not because he had bad credit, because he had no credit at all. A machine somewhere looked at a man who owed nothing to anybody on earth, and it decided he could not be trusted. Sit with that for 1 second. The man with nothing to hide was treated like a risk. The man who owed $60,000 on 4 different cards got approved for the same apartment that same week. That is not an accident. That is not a glitch in the system. That is the system working exactly the way it was built to work. And by the end of this, you will understand why a man with no balance to chase is the single most frightening thing a lender can encounter. Not because he is poor, because he cannot be owned. You have felt this before, even if you never had the words for it. You have felt the quiet suspicion in a loan officer's eyes when you tell them you have no debt. You have felt the strange hesitation when you say you paid cash. You have noticed, maybe without naming it, that the world seems built to reward people who owe money and punish the ones who do not. That is not your imagination. That is not bad luck. That is architecture. And it was built on purpose by people who profit from you, never noticing it was built at all. Marcus spent 15 years building what he thought was freedom. He skipped the vacations his coworkers took every year. He drove that same truck through 2 job changes and 1 layoff because a paid-off truck cannot be repossessed. He watched his brother-in-law upgrade his house twice, lease a new car every 3 years, and travel to 4 countries, all financed, all on paper looking like a man who had made it. Marcus made less noise. Marcus made no noise at all. And for a long time, Marcus believed that silence was the reward. Then the apartment denial came, and something in him cracked open, not because he needed that apartment desperately, because for the first time in his life, he understood that the system had never once been built to recognize a man like him. It was built to track him, measure him, and when it could not find a leash on him, it panicked. That panic has a name, and it goes back further than most people alive today would guess. 1987, October. A Monday morning that men your age remember with a kind of quiet dread, even now, decades later. The stock market did not slide that day. It fell off a cliff. In a single session, the Dow lost nearly 23% of its value. The worst single-day crash in the history of the American stock market. Worse than 1929. Worse than anything before or since. Men across this country, who had done everything right, who had built retirement accounts over 20 and 30 years of steady contributions, watched decades of discipline get erased between the opening bell and the closing bell. A man in Ohio named Harold Whitfield, 53 years old at the time, a plant supervisor who had never missed a payment in his life, had built a brokerage account worth close to $210,000. By the end of that single Monday, it was worth barely $140,000. He had not made a single bad decision. He had trusted a system that told him diversification meant safety. It did not. It meant that when panic hit, everything fell together, because everything was tied to the same rigged wheel. Here is what 1987 actually revealed, and it is the part most people never connect to their own life. The crash proved, in one brutal afternoon, that paper wealth inside the system is never truly yours. It can be marked up or marked down by forces you cannot see and cannot fight, because you agreed, just by participating, to let someone else hold the pen. Men like Harold did not lose their savings because they were reckless. They lost it because the entire structure was designed to be leveraged, margined, and interconnected in ways that made a single afternoon catastrophic for millions of ordinary, careful people simultaneously. The brokers on margin got wiped out fastest. The ones who had borrowed to buy more stock, who had leverage stacked on leverage, lost everything in hours. The men who owned their homes outright, who had no margin calls waiting, who had refused to borrow against their equity to buy more of the same rigged game, those men bruised. They did not shatter. That is the exact mechanism still running today, just wearing a different suit. The tool changes name every decade. Sometimes it is called margin. Sometimes it is called a home equity line. Sometimes it is called a credit score, but the function never changes. It exists to keep you leveraged, to keep you owing, to keep you tethered to an institution that can call in what it is owed the moment it decides the wind has shifted. A credit score is not a measurement of your character. It is a measurement of how much interest you are currently generating for someone else. Harold Whitfield's shattered retirement account in 1987 and Marcus's denied apartment application decades later are the same story, told with different paperwork. Both men discovered, at the exact moment it mattered most, that a system built on leverage does not know what to do with a man who refuses to be leveraged. It cannot price him. It cannot predict him. And a thing it cannot predict is a thing it has been trained from the ground up to treat as a threat. The mechanism is identical today. Only the names have changed. So let's talk about how the machine actually works, mechanically, because once you see the gears, you will never unsee them. Think of the entire consumer lending system as a factory that does not make cars or furniture. It makes interest. That is the product. You are not the customer in this factory. You are the raw material. Every credit card offer mailed to your house, every 0% financing deal on a mattress or a couch, every buy now, pay later button at checkout, these are not conveniences. They are hooks, engineered by people whose entire compensation depends on how much of your future income they can convert into a locked-in payment stream. The credit score exists to sort the raw material efficiently. It does not ask, is this man financially free? It asks, is this man currently profitable to lend to, and will he keep being profitable for years to come? A man with no debt generates no interest. He is, to this factory, worthless inventory. Worse than worthless. He is inventory that has escaped the floor entirely, and an escapee makes the whole factory nervous, because if word gets out that escape is possible, other inventory might start asking questions. This is not a conspiracy. Nobody is meeting in a back room laughing about it. It is simply engineering, done well, by people solving the problem they were paid to solve, which was never your well-being. It was extraction, dressed up as convenience. Now meet a second man, because one story alone could be bad luck. Two stories start to look like design. His name is Ray. Ray is 62 years old, a retired mid-level manager, who spent 31 years with the same manufacturing company, the kind of company that used to promise a pension and a gold watch and mean it. Ray trusted that company completely. He trusted his 401k advisor completely. He trusted the retirement projections handed to him every single year in a glossy folder that told him he was on track. In 2008, 6 years before his planned retirement, the company restructured. His pension was frozen. His 401k, invested exactly the way his advisor recommended, lost nearly 40% of its value in 12 months. As the housing collapse tore through every market it touched, Ray had done nothing wrong. He had followed every piece of advice given to him by professionals he was told to trust. He ended up working 9 extra years past the date he had planned to retire, not because he was careless, but because he had trusted an institution that had every incentive to keep him invested, keep him fee-generating, and no incentive whatsoever to protect him when the wind changed. Marcus was punished for owing nothing. Ray was punished for trusting the very system that told him trust was the responsible thing to do. Different mistake, if you can even call either of them a mistake. Same outcome, same machine. That is what makes this generational and structural rather than personal. It is not that Marcus and Ray made bad choices. It is that there was no version of this game where men like them were ever meant to win comfortably. The rules were written by the house, for the house. And here is the part that should make you angry. This was never about risk management. It was about control. A lender does not fear default nearly as much as he fears irrelevance. A man who owes nothing does not need the lender's approval, does not need the lender's product, does not need the lender's permission to live his life. That man has stepped outside the entire economic conversation, and an institution built entirely around being needed cannot tolerate a customer who has stopped needing it. So the system does the only thing it knows how to do. It recodes independence as suspicion. It takes the very discipline that should be celebrated and quietly relabels it as a red flag, because a red flag can be used to push you right back into the leash. One denied apartment, one denied lease, one denied line of credit at a time, until you take on just enough debt to become measurable again. This is where the social side of a man's life and the financial side stop being two separate conversations, because they never were. You have met men who walk into a room and it just goes quiet, not because they are loud, because they are not performing anything. They are not trying to sell you their car, their vacation, their new watch, their opinion. There used to be a code among men of a certain generation, never written down because it never needed to be. Every man in that room already understood it without a single word spoken. Say less than you know. Owe nothing you cannot pay tomorrow morning. Let your handshake be the only contract anyone needs. And sometime around the early 1960s, over the better part of 15 years, that code was quietly, deliberately taken apart, not because it stopped working, because it worked too well. A man who needed nothing could not be sold anything, and an economy built on selling things could not tolerate too many men like that walking around setting the example. Here is the part that should keep you up at night. That posture, The quiet command a certain kind of man carries into any room he enters was never about manners. It was never about charm or elegance or knowing which fork to use. It was math, wearing a suit. The reason that man does not raise his voice is because he does not need anything from anyone in that room. He does not need the loan officer's approval, the boss's next raise, the neighbor's admiration for a new truck he financed for 84 months. Needing nothing is not a personality trait. It is the direct byproduct of owing nothing. And owing nothing is what financial independence actually looks like once you strip away the marketing. That is why the two mirror men in this story matter so much. Marcus denied for having no debt. Ray punished for trusting the wrong ladder. Two very different mistakes that were never really mistakes at all, converging on the same discovery. The system does not reward the responsible man. It rewards the measurable man. And the only way to stop being measurable is to stop needing what the machine is selling. So where does that leave you? Sitting here at whatever age you are, having maybe done everything by the book your whole working life. It leaves you with a choice that has nothing to do with a spreadsheet and everything to do with identity. Do you want to spend the rest of your life as an asset on someone else's balance sheet, generating interest, generating fees, generating a data trail that gets sold to whoever wants to predict your next move? Or do you want to become the thing this entire machine was never built to handle? A man who cannot be leveraged because he owes nothing. A man who cannot be threatened because he needs nothing. A man who cannot be sold because he already has everything he actually requires. Marcus did not get that apartment the first week. He got it the second week, after paying 6 months up front in cash, a workaround the system never anticipated because it assumes everyone needs its permission. He did not need the system's approval. He needed a landlord willing to look past a number on a screen. He found one. And walking out of that signing, Marcus understood something his father had tried to tell him 30 years earlier, without ever quite finding the words. Owing nothing was never about the money. It was about never again having to ask permission. Choose invisibility. Choose silence. Choose leverage over no one, and leverage held by no one over you. Can't tax what it can't see. Can't collect on what was never owed. Can't threaten a man who has already walked out the door. That's the posture. That's the freedom. That's the whole quiet war fought without ever raising your voice. The men who understood this were never the loudest men in the room. They were simply the ones everyone else could not stop watching.